Imagine a woman who, from a Jewish and atheist background, traversed the depths of doubt and pain to achieve sainthood. The story of Edith Stein is not just a biography, but an extraordinary journey of spiritual, philosophical, and human transformation. In a world marked by divisions and challenges, she offers us a rare vision of how faith can illuminate even the darkest and most difficult paths. From brilliant thinker to martyr, Edith's life is a living testimony of courage, truth, and dedication. Did you know that she found God in a moment of deep existential crisis, and that this search led her to be canonized as Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross? In this video, we will delve into Edith Stein's miraculous journey and understand how her life can inspire ours. If you've ever felt lost, questioned the purpose of life, or faced suffering without knowing how to deal with it, Edith Stein's story has something valuable for you. Let's discover together how the search for truth, faith, and reason can be powerful allies in times of difficulty, and how, like her, we can transform our own lives. The unexpected journey to Edith Stein. This name, for many, may not sound very familiar, but her story is one that touches the soul and challenges our deepest concepts. Born in 1891 into a Jewish family in what was then Breslau, she seemed destined for a conventional life, like so many other young women of her time. However, fate, or rather her intellectual and spiritual restlessness, charted a surprising and profound path. Edith, who in her youth declared herself an atheist, eventually became Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, a name that echoes hope and faith in difficult times. Imagine what it meant to be a woman, Jewish and intellectual at the beginning of the 20th century. Edith not only faced these barriers, but also overcame them with impressive determination. Her journey from disbelief to sainthood was not a sudden change, but a journey of discovery, marked by difficult questions and an incessant search for truth. Who, after all, could imagine that a skeptical philosopher who questioned even the existence of God would be canonized as a saint? Edith's story resonates especially with those living in uncertain times. After all, how many times do we ask ourselves if we are on the right path or if our choices are truly ours? Edith faced these doubts head-on, confronting atheism as part of her process of self-discovery. She never settled for easy answers or imposed dogmas. Instead, she sought something that touched her heart and gave meaning to her life. And you know, what's fascinating? Edith wasn't seeking fame or recognition. All she wanted was to understand the world, herself, and the purpose of her existence. Her transformation, from someone who denied the existence of God to a life of total surrender to Him, is a testament to the human heart's thirst for something greater, even when we can't name what we're searching for. Edith Stein's story is not just about her. It's about all of us, about the questions we ask, the struggles we face, and the answers we sometimes find in the most unexpected places. And, as we will see in her life, many of these answers arose in the historical and family context in which she lived. Historical and cultural context. To understand the depth of Edith Stein's journey, it is essential to delve into the setting in which she lived. Born on October 12, 1891, in Breslau, a city that is now part of Poland, but at the time belonged to the German Empire, Edith grew up in a world marked by rapid social, cultural, and political changes. It was the beginning of the 20th century, a time when modernity promised advances, but also challenged traditions. Europe was in turmoil, with Enlightenment ideals in vogue and rising political tensions that would culminate in World War I. Edith came from a Jewish family deeply rooted in its traditions. Her mother, Auguste, was a woman of unwavering faith, a successful businesswoman who raised her children alone after her husband's death. Edith was the youngest of 11 siblings and from an early age showed herself to be different, intelligent, and inquisitive. She had an affectionate but often tense relationship with her family's religious practices. Although she was raised within the Jewish faith at 14, Edith stopped attending the synagogue, declaring herself agnostic. This was not just youthful rebellion, it was a reflection of her relentless search for truth. Life in Breslau at that time was a fascinating mix of cultures, with a vibrant Jewish community but also integrated into the German social fabric. Edith grew up in an environment that valued both education and tradition. However, Jewish assimilation into German society was a delicate issue. While many Jews sought to integrate and prosper, they still faced discrimination and prejudice. This partly shaped Edith's critical sense and worldview. Moreover, the European context in which Edith was educated was deeply influenced by the ideas of philosophers like Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, who questioned traditional religion and morality. For a young woman with a thirst for knowledge, these thoughts were like an invitation to explore the limits of human thought. At the same time, the rise of the feminist movement in Europe inspired women like Edith to seek space in the academic world, a field still dominated by men. This historical and cultural setting not only influenced Edith, but also provided the backdrop for her future choices. While many people around her conformed to traditions or rejected spirituality, Edith walked a singular path, guided by her own questions. Her childhood and youth, shaped by her family and the era in which she lived, were the foundations of a journey that would take her far beyond the expectations of her generation. Young Edith, intelligence and the search for truth. From a very young age, Edith Stein showed herself to be a brilliant mind. As a child, she was curious and determined, traits that soon caught the attention of her family and teachers. At 20, in 1911, Edith decided to study at the University of Breslau, a bold decision for a young woman in a still deeply patriarchal world. There, she immersed herself in her studies, especially in the fields of psychology and philosophy, areas that were undergoing significant transformation at the time. Edith's passion for philosophy led her, in 1913, to the University of Göttingen, where she met a mentor who would change her life, Edmund Husserl. Considered the father of phenomenology, Husserl not only influenced Edith's academic trajectory, but also challenged her to see the world in a completely new way. For her, phenomenology was more than a philosophical method. It was a tool to explore the essence of things, going beyond appearances. This meeting marked the beginning of her intellectual journey in search of truth. But Edith's search was not purely academic. She was deeply restless. Despite her impressive intelligence, she felt that something was missing. In one of her letters, she confessed that although she loved philosophy, she couldn't find definitive answers to life's most important questions. Who am I? Why am I here? What really matters? These questions became the center of her existence and led her to explore ideas and beliefs that often challenged her initial upbringing. During World War I, Edith interrupted her studies to work as a volunteer, nurse caring for wounded soldiers in a field hospital. This experience, between 1915 and 1916, was profoundly transformative. Seeing human suffering up close, Edith began to realize that life could not be explained solely by logic or science. There was a deeper spiritual dimension that she did not yet fully understand, but felt she needed to explore. When she returned to academia in 1916, Edith was more determined than ever. She completed her doctoral thesis under Husserl's guidance, receiving the title with honors. However, even with all these achievements, Edith was not satisfied. Something inside her drove her to continue searching, exploring, and questioning. This restlessness would make her one of the most brilliant minds of her time and pave the way for an even deeper transformation in her life. Conversion. From encountering faith to religious life. The year was 1921, and Edith Stein was 29 years old. During a visit to friend's home, she found a book that would change her life forever, the autobiography of Saint Teresa of Avila. Until then, Edith had dedicated herself entirely to reason and logic, but as she leafed through those pages, something happened. She was deeply moved by the words of the Spanish saint, who described her search for God and the struggle to live a life of total surrender. Edith read the book in a single night, unable to put it down. Upon finishing, she declared with simplicity, but with unwavering certainty, "This is the truth." This experience was just the beginning of a transformation that would not be easy. Edith came from a Jewish family and moreover was a respected intellectual. Deciding to embrace Christianity was not just a matter of faith, but a social and personal challenge. Her mother, Auguste, was deeply shaken upon learning of her daughter's decision. For her, Christianity represented a rupture with family traditions, something Edith understood but could not ignore. Despite the objections, she remained firm in her decision, demonstrating a courage that would come to define her life. On January 1st, 1922, Edith was baptized in the Catholic Church. She was 30 years old, and contrary to what many might imagine, she did not make this decision impulsively. For years, she had studied the scriptures, read works of theology, and reflected deeply on the meaning of Christian faith. For Edith, baptism was a natural step, the culmination of a spiritual search that began long before she met Saint Teresa of Avila. After baptism, Edith felt an even deeper calling, religious life. However, her journey to Carmel was not immediate. She spent nearly a decade as a teacher and lecturer, sharing her wisdom with students and colleagues. During this period, she also translated works by St. Thomas Aquinas and other theologians, further deepening her understanding of faith. Finally, in 1933, at 42, Edith entered the Carmel of Cologne, taking the name Sister Teresa Benedicta of the Cross. This name symbolized her union with Christ and the acceptance of suffering as part of her vocation. For Edith, life in Carmel was not an escape from the world, but a way to intercede for it. There, she found the peace she had sought for so many years, but was also preparing unknowingly for the greatest sacrifice of her life. The philosopher and the Carmelite, faith and reason. When Edith Stein joined the Carmel in 1933, she brought with her not only her newfound faith, but also all the intellectual baggage accumulated over years of intense study. As Sister Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, she united two worlds that many considered incompatible: the depth of philosophical reason and the richness of spiritual faith. In her heart, Edith believed there was no conflict between thinking deeply and believing intensely. On the contrary, she saw these two aspects as inseparable parts of the search for truth. During her years in Carmel, Edith dedicated herself to a monastic lifestyle that combined prayer, meditation, and intellectual work. She followed the Carmelite routine with discipline, but also reserved time to write and reflect. It was in this environment of silence and introspection that she produced some of her most important works. Among them stands out Finite and Eternal Being, a profound study on the relationship between God and humanity. In this book, Edith argues that understanding God does not nullify the use of reason, but on the contrary, expands its possibilities. Edith was also concerned with practical issues. As someone who had lived in the academic world, she knew the difficulties faced by those seeking meaning in their lives. Many of her reflections address the importance of finding balance between material and spiritual life. In one of her letters, she wrote, "True wisdom lies in living with your feet on the ground, but with your heart turned to heaven." This phrase echoes today as valuable advice for those trying to reconcile the hustle and bustle of daily life with the need to connect with something greater. In addition to her philosophical writing, Edith also translated classical theological works, such as those of Saint Thomas Aquinas, bringing these texts to a wider audience. Her work demonstrated that she not only understood these concepts, but also knew how to communicate them clearly and accessibly. This made her a vital bridge between Catholic tradition and modern thought. Life in Carmel was one of simplicity but never isolation. Edith understood that her vocation as a Carmelite was above all intercessory. In her prayers and writings, she sought to offer answers to the questions of her time, especially in a period marked by so many uncertainties and crises. Her solid faith and brilliant intellect made her a unique figure, a woman who was not afraid to face the challenges of reason, nor to surrender to the mystery of faith. Martyrdom and sainthood, a testimony of faith. The 1930s brought devastating changes to Europe, especially with the rise of the Nazi regime in Germany. Edith Stein, now Sister Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, knew that her status as a converted Jew made her a target. In 1933, when Adolf Hitler came to power, anti-Semitic policies began to intensify. Even in Carmel, Edith felt the growing pressure of the outside world. She understood that her vocation did not exempt her from the suffering that afflicted her. People but firmly believed that she could offer her life as a sacrifice of love in an attempt to protect her. Her superiors allowed Edith to transfer to the Carmel of Echt in the Netherlands in 1938. Initially, it seemed a prudent decision, as the Netherlands had not yet been occupied by the Nazis. However, in 1940, the German army invaded the country, bringing with it the Nuremberg racial laws. Edith continued her monastic life, but was fully aware of the danger she faced. In one of her letters, she wrote, "I accept in advance the death that God has reserved for me, in complete submission to His holy will." On August 2nd, 1942, Edith and her sister Rosa, who had also converted to Catholicism and worked as a helper in Carmel, were arrested by the Gestapo. This occurred as retaliation for the public condemnation of Nazism by Dutch bishops who denounced the atrocities against Jews in a pastoral letter. Edith was sent to the Westerbork transit camp, where, according to witnesses, she stood out for her calm and compassion. Despite the inhumane conditions, she dedicated her time to comforting the women and children around her, many of them in despair. A few days later, on August 7th, 1942, Edith and Rosa were deported to Auschwitz. There, they faced the brutal reality of the Holocaust. Although official records are scarce, it is believed that both were murdered on August 9th, 1942, in the gas chambers. Edith was 50 years old. Her death, however, was not in vain. For many, she became a symbol of spiritual resistance and a testimony of faith amid darkness. The impact of her life and death was recognized by the Catholic Church decades later. On May 1st, 1987, Pope John Paul II beatified Edith Stein, recognizing her as a martyr of faith. On October 11th, 1998, she was canonized, becoming Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross. Her story continues to inspire Christians worldwide, especially those facing persecution or crises of faith. Thus, the martyrdom of Edith Stein was not just a tragedy, but also a powerful message of love and sacrifice. The legacy of Edith Stein, a bridge between worlds. The legacy of Edith Stein goes far beyond her life and death. Her journey not only reflects a personal quest for truth, but also became a bridge between two worlds, the spiritual and the intellectual, the Jewish and the Christian. As a philosopher, she brought a unique perspective to the dialogue between faith and reason. Throughout her life, Edith demonstrated that the search for God does not oppose the search for philosophical truth, but can in fact enrich it. In her writings, she sought to reconcile science and religion, something that became a personal mission and an important contribution to the Catholic Church and contemporary thought. In addition to her contribution to philosophy, Edith also played a crucial role in inter-religious dialogue, especially between Jews and Christians. As a Jew converted to Christianity, she knew what it was like to live between two traditions, and this helped her to be a mediator and a voice for reconciliation between these two great religions. She believed that the truth of God is universal, and that, despite differences, Jews and Christians share the search for the same divine truth. In her last letters, Edith expressed her hope that, through dialogue, the historical wounds between the two religions could be healed. Her life also served as a model for many contemporary women. At a time when women's roles were often underestimated or limited, Edith demonstrated that a woman could be both a deep thinker and a devoted follower of Christ. Her intelligence and faith made her a figure of strength, something that continues to inspire women around the world to seek true spiritual and intellectual freedom. Edith showed that faith does not require renouncing reason and that reason should not exclude the search for God. Her life and legacy transcended the boundaries of time. Today, more than 80 years after her death, Edith Stein continues to be a source of inspiration for many. She is a symbol of how the search for truth can be both a spiritual and intellectual journey, and how faith can be the key to a deeper understanding of reason. Her legacy remains alive in the hearts of those who seek more than an intellectual answer, but a real encounter with divine truth. Post-canon impact and recognition. After her canonization in 1998, the life and legacy of Edith Stein received even wider recognition. The Catholic Church, by proclaiming her Saint Teresa Benedicta of the Cross, not only honored her memory, but also highlighted her importance to the modern world. The impact of her canonization was not limited to the field of faith, but spread to various areas, especially education, philosophy, and interreligious dialogue. Her life became an example of how faith can be a driving force for transformation in the world, even in times of pain and suffering. Interest in Edith Stein increased substantially after her canonization. Seminars, lectures, and courses began to explore her philosophical thought, especially on the relationship between reason and faith. Philosophers, theologians, and scholars from various academic fields began to study her works, recognizing her as one of the most notable thinkers of the 20th century. Furthermore, her writings continue to be a vital source for those seeking a model of intelligent and deep faith, capable of facing the challenges of the modern world without losing spiritual depth. In many Christian circles, especially within the Catholic Church, Edith Stein has become a symbol of how to live a radically true life of faith without compromising reason. Her approach to Christianity as a journey of deep knowledge and personal transformation inspired not only philosophers, but also many religious leaders and lay people. Her figure is often seen as a link between traditional Christianity and the spiritual and intellectual needs of the contemporary world. Moreover, her life of holiness and martyrdom continues to resonate with those facing religious persecution or spiritual difficulties. She's seen by many as an intercessor, someone who, through her own death, gained the ability to accompany and support those who are suffering. Her story inspires those facing adversity to maintain their faith, reminding them that holiness often comes through struggle and sacrifice. Edith Stein also had a significant impact on Jewish and interreligious communities. Her life as a Jew converted to Christianity symbolizes the possibility of reconciliation and mutual understanding. She was not just a thinker, but a woman who crossed religious and cultural barriers, promoting peace and dialogue between Jews and Christians. In a world still marked by divisions, her example continues to be a beacon of hope for building bridges between different religious communities. a message of hope and action. The life of Edith Stein offers us a profound lesson of faith and action, especially in times of difficulty. Her testimony is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, it is possible to find light and purpose. Her journey from atheism to sainthood inspires us never to give up the search for truth, to face challenges with courage, and to trust fully in God, even when everything around us seems uncertain. Today, more than ever, the life of Edith Stein can be a source of motivation for those facing their own battles. She teaches us that in the midst of suffering, there is the possibility of spiritual growth and transformation. When life becomes difficult and faith is tested, we can look to Edith's example and remember that sacrifice and fidelity to God always bear fruit, even if the results are not immediately visible. But Edith's story is not just about contemplation, it is also about action. She calls us to act, to seek truth without fear, and to live authentically. Her journey did not end with her death. It continues to live in every person who chooses to follow her example. And how can we apply this in our lives? By cultivating faith and reason, seeking reconciliation, and living with a depth that goes beyond the superficiality of everyday life. Edith reminds us that true transformation begins within us, and that our actions can indeed make a difference in the world around us. How can you apply these teachings? Start with the search for truth, whether in your own heart or through the study of thinkers like Edith Stein. Dedicate yourself to strengthening your faith, living authentically, and seeking peace and reconciliation in your own circle of relationships. No matter how many difficulties may arise, Edith's life teaches us that action grounded in faith can transform the world. And finally, Edith Stein's life challenges us. How far are we willing to go in our search for truth and holiness? Can we face adversities with the same courage she demonstrated? May her life inspire us to remain steadfast, with hope on the path of our own spiritual journey. Conclusion. Now that we know the extraordinary journey of Edith Stein, it is impossible not to reflect on the depth of her life and how she can inspire us on our own paths. Faith, reason, and suffering intertwine in her story, showing that it is possible to find a greater purpose even in the most difficult situations. Edith not only overcame her own struggles, but also left us a legacy of hope, action, and reconciliation. And the question remains, what can we learn and apply from all this? How can we seek more truth in our lives, act with more courage and faith, just as she did? As we conclude this video, I invite you to reflect. What is the role of faith in your life today? What can you do to deepen it even more? Edith Stein showed that even amid suffering, there is the possibility of transformation and growth. Perhaps true transformation begins in each of us now, in our daily decisions. If this video touched your heart, like it, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications to continue following content that inspires and challenges our faith journey. Let's move together towards our faith.